Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick sound check. Yep, you can hear me. Hopefully, I'll be able to hear all of you. Welcome, everyone, to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, May 4th. We are meeting tonight, as always, on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Squam, Squamish. We have an amended agenda. We have a motion to adopt the amended agenda by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? It carries. As with all of our meetings held electronically, we have to pass Ministerial Order M192, which explains the reasons why we cannot hold in-person meetings at this time due to public health orders, and that we're ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at the meeting through the following means. The meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. And the meeting is open to the public for electronic participation via WebEx. So if someone would like to move that. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are meeting electronically, which means that when council members disconnect or reconnect to the meeting, if they can let me know so that we can record that in the minutes. If council members wish to speak, simply need to raise your hand if you're connected by video. But if for some reason you're connected by audio only, just say chair and I'll put you on the speakers list. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state a nay vote. No statements required if you're in favor. Just ask that everyone participating in tonight's meeting, whether council, staff, or the public, to keep their device on mute until it's their turn to speak. Council members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. If you're having technical difficulties, our corporate officer is here, council, you can text her. And the meeting will be recessed for up to 10 minutes if the technical difficulties are in fact on our side, and we will make sure we get everyone reconnected before we proceed. All right, so with that, council, any notice of motion? Seeing none, we have one delegation this evening. We are going to be joined by Leanne Roderick from the Vehicle Residents of Squamish.
Hi, I don't have a video, but I'm just hoping everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can, Ms. Roderick, and you've got 5 minutes to address council.
Wonderful, thank you. The Vehicle Residents of Squamish Advocacy Group would like to begin by acknowledging that we operate on the unceded, ancestral, and traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Good evening, members of council, and thank you, Mayor Elliott, for granting me 5 minutes this evening to address 2 of the bylaws and bylaw amendments before you tonight. My name is Leanne Roderick, and I'm speaking to you this evening in my role as a co-director of the Vehicle Residents of Squamish Advocacy Group on behalf of the many vehicle residents that call Squamish home. Professionally, I'm a lecturer of urban studies with Simon Fraser University, and previously I was a tutor at Quest University. I am presently a homeowner, although when I first moved to Squamish in 2014, my family and I lived in a vehicle for a few months while we worked hard to secure affordable housing. Many of my friends and acquaintances in Squamish got their start here the same way. Many still live in vehicles, and some have had to move into vehicles recently as a solution for difficult housing. Others choose to live this way as a matter of integrity, a commitment to sustainability, and minimizing their carbon footprint. Others still use vehicles as a solution to being homeless. In my volunteer advocacy work with the VRS, I've had the pleasure of getting to know many of our town's vehicle residents. Our neighbors living in vehicles represent many of the values and attributes our community upholds in the official community plan. Despite many hardships and in the face of ongoing stigma, the vehicle resident community is vibrant, inclusive, and connected. They are remarkable stewards of the environment, and many of them work in frontline positions here in Squamish that support our attempts towards a thriving and diverse economy. They're artists, they're startup founders, they're recreationalists. Some were born and raised in Squamish and have really great stories to tell about how our town has changed over the last several decades and how they struggle to fit in here now. Many vehicle residents rely on the VRS, a collective of about 10 to 15 vehicle resident volunteers and their allies, to represent their interests and help advocate for them. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the VRS against the proposed camping bylaw 2829 and traffic amendment bylaw 2820, which are up for 3 readings tonight. Both yourselves and the public have had just 5 days to read through this suite of bylaws and amendments. I would love to take a few minutes to acknowledge the hard work of staff in preparing the visitor management policy and thank them for taking the time to listen and engage with us and include some of our suggestions, namely expanding access to public toilets. There are many aspects of the report from last week that deserve praise, but sadly, with just a few minutes, I have to get right to the parts that we're finding problematic. I'd like to begin by saying that by and large, the VRS is in support of the visitor management policy that you were presented with last week. We agree with many of the findings in the framework. We do, however, find the accompanying suite of bylaws and bylaw amendments that were released on Thursday afternoon difficult to reconcile with the stated aims and findings of the report. I'll begin by stating that the VRS wholeheartedly supports attempts to enhance enforcement opportunities for the behaviors that we're all trying to mitigate this upcoming tourist season. Things like leaving out wildlife attractants and dumping, improper disposal of human waste, etc. We love Squamish and we care deeply about stewardship of the land. We have offered our support to the district and Tourism Squamish through educating visitors that reach out to our group and continuing to organize community cleanups and advising on the best placement for public toilets. We are opposed to bylaw 2829 because it does not address these undesirable behaviors and activities. Bylaw 2829 prohibits, and in some cases closely regulates, sleeping and sheltering. Sleeping, particularly sleeping in a parked vehicle or trailer in a parking space, is not a problematic behavior in and of itself. For this reason, the proposed camping bylaw has no business being tucked into this visitor management strategy. This is a rushed attempt completed only over the last few weeks at something that the public was told time and time again since 2019 would be the result of long-term research conducted by a third-party professional consultant and subject to extensive public engagement. Bylaw 2829 is none of these things. District staff found through engagement for the visitor management strategy that vehicle residents of Squamish are not the target audience for this policy and are generally not the people engaging in activities like dumping, littering, and defecating in the woods. It has been stated that the biggest area of concern is in managing visitor impacts rather than impacts of year-round residents who may be camping or sleeping in vehicles. However, Bylaw Amendment 2830, which is also before you tonight, applies to anyone in a vehicle and makes no distinction between visitors and vehicle residents. Section 4.2K tells vehicle residents that between May 15th and September 30th, no one may occupy a parked vehicle or trailer for more than an hour. Effectually, this is another attempt at a blanket ban on sleeping in a vehicle on public land. It's really unclear from these two bylaws, as well as Schedule A, where someone can safely and legally sleep in their vehicle overnight in the district. As far as we can tell in the few days that we've had to review the map, this camping bylaw does not differ significantly from the blanket ban that has previously been attempted with camping bylaw 2679.
1 more minute, please.
Okay. Bylaw 2679, as you'll remember, faced significant public opposition, both in its initial adoption phase in May of 2019, and then again last summer when Council attempted to remove Schedule A. Council received significant correspondence, which the VRS has reviewed carefully. Most of this correspondence from the public has asked for more sustainable and inclusive solutions for Squamish's vehicle residents, and we've been waiting patiently for this. We have been patient and offered our time and expertise to help craft these longer-term solutions. And yet tonight, the same bylaw that excludes anyone from sleeping in a vehicle throughout the district is up before us again. We kindly ask the council to at least slow down the consideration of the 3 readings to allow for more time for public engagement. There are many more things that we can say about this, but this deserves proper time and care in order to do this well. The visitor management strategy is meant to protect the interests of the community, and like it or not, vehicle residents are a part of our community. And bylaw 2829 and 2830 does not help to protect them. It doesn't belong as a part of the visitor management strategy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. Okay, Council. We have a number of proclamations this evening. First is proclamation request for Public Works Week. And Mr. Smith, I believe you're joining us this evening.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, and first off, I'd like to apologize for not getting my report to you. I'd like to do a kudos to Ledge Services and Miss Glende and all senior staff that have to go through the report review process. It's very extensive, and I missed one section of it, the very last section, and I apologize for that. But I will just briefly highlight the summary of my report, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Great. So my objective this evening is to request that council proclaim May 16th to 22nd as Public Works Week in the District of Squamish and to request support and participation from council. As a brief background, 2021 will be the 11th year that we've celebrated this event. A bit of project information is the theme for 2021 is Stronger Together. Some of the important information for council is budget implications are nil this year. Unfortunately, we don't get to have the kids come by this year due to COVID. And just the organizational impact is we've got some events planned, we've got some videos planned, all being done in-house, and we're going to share that with the community through our website, and we're also going to share it with the kids in the school district 48. And that is the summary of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. It's a sad time that we can't have Public Works Week again this year. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're going to make the most of what we can do rather than focusing on what we can't do. Because I know it's something that council values, our staff value, and the community values as well. So council, so we're going to put forward the proclamation by Council Rice, second by Council Pettengill. Any further comments? Council Pettengill?
Yeah, just to say I'm going to miss the events this year again, and really look forward to actually participating, hopefully next year. And just I've put it in my calendar, but would love a reminder to wear our T-shirts in a couple weeks. If there's someone there that can send us a reminder, it'd be much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Pettengill. I'll call a question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
It is Child Care Month in the province of British Columbia. And we have a staff recommendation that council proclaim May 2021 as Child Care Month and May 2021 as Child Care Provider Appreciation Day in the district of Squam. French, you're moving that. Seconded by Councilor Stoner. We kick off the month with a roundtable with our MP, Patrick Weiler. He hosted an online event on Monday evening. It was really well attended, and I know Councilor French, Councilor Stoner was there, Councilor Hertford. It was a great discussion with some great questions from folks in the Sea to Sky. And then I'll be hosting my mayor's drop-in on May 13th in the evening. And we've got Ms. McJanet joining me along with some of our other partners at the community table, and as well as ST48 to talk a little bit more with a local focus about what we're doing around improving access to childcare in the district of Squamish. So this is a great thing to keep a focus on, especially in light of the new federal money for universal childcare. So with that, I will call the question. Any opposed? Carries. And finally, a request to proclaim May 10th, 2021 as the Day of Action Against Anti-Asian Racism in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Any comments? Mr. Stoner, Councilor Pettengill.
I'll just say that some of the statistics, especially that are coming out of Vancouver in terms of the significant increase in Asian hate crimes, is really, really saddening. I'm so happy to proclaim this day. I think it's an important day of recognition that there's no place in our community for racism, especially anti-Asian racism, that has been such a significant increase over the past year. So happy to support this proclamation.
Thank you, Councilor Stoner. Councilor Pettengill.
Yes, I'm also happy to support this. Unhappy that we have to have resolutions like this, but that it's here. Glad to support it. As part of the reading group through the library, we've been reading Valerie Quar's "See No Stranger," and it speaks to the experience in the Sikh community after 9/11, and a lot of the racism that was, and to some degree is still experienced today. I thought I followed politics fairly closely and was aware of things, but I had no idea the degree of racism and violence. And so just reading that and seeing this resolution just reminds me that some of us are quite fortunate, and we still need to be very diligent and pay attention. These things do happen. It's important to say we don't support it, and to make sure when we see these sorts of things that we're standing against it. And so I think this is a very important resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is item 6, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is anyone who feels that they have something they need to address with council and that can't wait for 2 weeks. Not seeing any. There's no public hearings tonight. And so we'll move on to our bylaw readings in section 9. 9A1, District of Squamish Fees and Charges Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 2827, 2021. And Mr. Villanuskas, is this yours?
Yes, good evening, Council. My name is Jonas Villanuskas, and tonight I am presenting proposed first 3 readings for fees and charges bylaw update, as well as the business licensing bylaw. I'm just going to load my presentation up. Can Council see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So community planning has identified a number of changes to development application fees, both building and planning, that are due for review and necessary to ensure that the development review process remains primarily funded by development application fees. A number of changes are also proposed to the business license bylaw to remove regulatory duplication between the district's requirements and provincial requirements for cannabis retail. So cannabis retail, when it was first regulated in the district, it was not regulated by the province, and now the province is regulating it. So we're proposing to remove parts of the bylaw that were intended to provide that oversight that the province is now doing. And I'm just going to move into the background. So we've started this project in November of last year. There was a report to Committee of the Whole, which introduced the proposed changes. We got some feedback from Council. We did community engagement following that. And then last month, we brought another report with an update of what we heard from the stakeholders and the public, and some more proposed changes. So the notable changes are for building permits. There's a general increase in fees from $9 per $1,000 of construction value to $11. And then there's a decrease in fees for tenant improvements from $9 to $7 per $1,000, and low carbon self-sufficient buildings also from $9 to $7. After the last Committee of the Whole meeting, we heard some concern from Council regarding the reduction of fees for privately built affordable housing in advance of the review of our community amenity contribution policy. So what we're proposing is to freezing the fees for those applications at $9. So they would remain essentially the same as they are now, and we can revisit this item when we review the community amenity contribution policy. Other changes are to increase the plan processing fee. Right now, we collect a on every application a minimal fee of $90. So we're proposing to increase that to $200. And then, depending on the value of the application, increase the fee to $500, except for tenant improvements and accessory dwelling units. So those would stay at $200, no matter if they're over $100,000 of construction value. and then increase the processing fee to 1,000, between 1,000 and 3,000 if the projects are in the range of 1 million and then more than 5 million. Increase permit extension fee, increase the extension fee to a higher amount, to 1,000 for applications with 1 million and above in construction value. And then we're also proposing to eliminate permit fees for publicly funded and owned affordable housing and district facilities. Now, both of those types of projects are generally, the fees are generally waived by council, so this would just eliminate that step that we often take. So in terms of what are low carbon self-sufficient buildings, which are the type of buildings that are eligible for that lower rate for building permits, they have to be to meet two criteria. One, energy for cooking and heating must come from a renewable energy source. And the building's energy efficiency needs to be one step above the energy step code requirements. Or if the building is already at the top, which is the case for a lot of the multifamily buildings, the building has to produce 20% of its estimated annual energy consumption on site. Notable changes for planning fees. So we are proposing to increase the sub-area planning fee substantially from 22,000 to 100,000. And this eliminates the need for staff to then negotiate with the applicants capacity funding, which usually happens after an application is made for a sub-area plan. We are proposing to remove discounts for larger residential development applications and for those that do concurrent official community plan and rezoning applications. Align fees for delegated and non-delegated applications for larger applications only. So we've recently increased the amount of applications that are delegated, and some are quite significant. And so we want to make sure that we're still getting appropriate fees for those. Increase the minimum fees for subdivision, and also eliminate application fees for nonprofit affordable housing and district facilities, similar to building permit fees. In terms of cannabis retail, we are proposing to reduce the business licensing fees. So right now, cannabis retailers have to pay $5,000 annually. So we're proposing to reduce that to $3,000 for the first year and then down to $130 for subsequent years. And the idea is that a lot of our review work and public consultation has to happen in that first year. We are also proposing to remove 4 sections in the business licensing bylaw that regulate cannabis retail to essentially align this kind of activity with any other type of retail business requirements. So we're removing section 6.7, which deals with additional requirements such as security plans, criminal record checks, and proof of having a lease. Section 6.8, which limits who can hold a cannabis retail license, how many licenses can be held, and if you can operate it in conjunction with other uses. And then removing sections 6.9 and 6.10, and those regulate premises where cannabis is sold, such as signage, air filtration, and security measures, as well as business hours and on-site consumption and attendance. So there's 2 recommendations. The first one is related to the fees and charges bylaw for first 3 readings, and the second one is related to the business license bylaw, also for first 3 readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melnikas. Council, are there any questions on either of those 2 bylaws? We discussed this at length at committee of the whole, so if there's any last minute questions, now's your time. Okay, seeing none, then staff recommendation is to move first 3 readings of the fees and charges bylaw 28, 27, 24. Moved by Councilor Reeves, second by Councilor Stoner. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is staff recommendation that District of Squamish give first readings to amendment bylaw number 2826. Business license bylaw. Moved by Councilor French. I'll second that. Any comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Valdez.
Thank you.
Next up, District of Squamish Camping Bylaw number 2829, 2021. And we'll be joined by Mr. Paisley, Kaylee Kidner.
Good evening, Mayor Elliott and members of council and members of the community. My name is Dan Paisley and I'm the Acting General Manager of Community Services. This evening, I'm here to ask council to provide 3 readings to the district's new camping bylaw 2829, 3 readings to the amended bylaw 2830, and which is the traffic bylaw, and parks use bylaw amendments bylaw 2828. Next slide, please. This evening's discussion is a balance between ensuring the quality of life for residents in Squamish while supporting those most vulnerable in our community, while ensuring we do not have a blanket ban on the right to shelter, while also being welcome to the tourists that also are part of our community. Those 4 areas are a delicate balance, and the camping and visitor management plan is designed to hopefully have everybody work in harmony, yet when things do go awry, we will have the tools to educate and enforce. So the first goal is to help mitigate or manage and mitigate visitor impacts during the summer season in all neighborhoods. As I mentioned, to support tourism, but to do it in a way that moves campers to organized campsites, of which we have 728 sites within Squamish. To take into consideration the needs, as I mentioned, of the homeless, including their legal rights, while to continue to work with our provincial partners to secure affordable housing for Squamish residents across the housing continuum. Next slide, please. The objective of this evening is to provide clarity to the new proposed district camping bylaw and amendments to a district traffic bylaw and park use bylaw for consideration of 3 readings. At this time, I also want to acknowledge this has been challenging to interpret for our community, as we did not do a good job as I presented it a week ago. It was just an overarching review of the document. Today, we will go into detailed analysis of each of the points that impact through the camping bylaw and the parking bylaw, and ensure that we try to articulate the connectivity between all of the bylaws that work together to provide that support that we need. So the background as how we got here, as you know, is to help the large amount of traffic that's about to enter the corridor over the next several months. And we know that that is a significant growth, and it puts a lot of stress on the recreational and other assets inside the community. The plan that we presented to mitigate many of these issues through the management plan was presented April 27th, the Committee of the Whole, which outlined various strategies, policy and non-policy. Part of the plan involves the new camping bylaw, as I mentioned, and this evening we're here to speak to that particularly, with the emphasis of this being targeted during peak visitor season. And that's what we're trying to do with this particular suite of bylaws. Next slide, please. Amendments to the park use bylaw in conjunction with corresponding regulations in the new camping bylaw clarify the criteria which temporary shelters can be erected for homeless. The new camping bylaw clearly defines and distinguishes between the homeless and recreational visitor camping in our community outside of designated campgrounds. The intention of these changes is to strengthen districts' ability to manage and mitigate a variety of environmental and social impacts within our neighborhoods. They're especially focused on pre-identified areas of concerns due to their environmental sensitivity, risk of congregation, and proximity to neighbors. Lastly, these bylaws aim to ensure Squamish residents can enjoy our public spaces and amenities alongside the tourists that will join us. At this point, it does get a little bit dry, and it's a bit wordy, but I'm going to read from our report to council to ensure that I have captured the important points and are able to share those with you in the community to hopefully further clarify some of the issues that we left last week. In order to mitigate visitor impacts and manage the right to shelter for homeless, staff proposed the following bylaws and amendments as outlined, and they're presented in this package. To begin with, Schedule A in the new camping bylaw maintains the red area identified in the current camping bylaw 2869. These red areas expressly prohibit anyone from camping or sheltering overnight due to the environmentally sensitive areas they're within. The new blue area in Schedule A indicates the area which the bylaw applies. The blue area indicates where homeless can shelter and where recreational camping cannot occur. And I appreciate there's a number of parts within each of the respective bylaws that one would have to have, but what I tried to put together was just a very succinct response to someone if you were asked on the street, or I was, how does this all work together? And really, what we're saying is that you can't do anything in section 3.2 in the blue area or the red area unless you're a homeless person. If you're a homeless person, you can set up temporary shelter in those locations in the blue area. The bylaw does not apply to federal or provincial or private land. So that is one of the key areas that's been addressed in the camping bylaw. Next slide, please. I spoke to this earlier. Amend bylaws to manage the rights of the homeless to shelter temporarily overnight on public lands. Much of the feedback that we've heard is wanting us, one, questioning, have we learned from other examples, from other communities? What have we applied from those learnings? And that's what part of this is all about. It's in there to ensure that we are on the right side of the Supreme Court decision around the right to shelter, which has caused a great deal of challenges for communities as they try to adjust to that. We are actually trying to be proactive and address that issue through our bylaws. Next slide, please. The next bylaw that we're talking about is the traffic bylaw. And we're just trying to eliminate duplications in the two bylaws from camping to the traffic bylaws. So there's just clarity between those two particular tools, and it's easier for our enforcement officers to educate and to enforce. Next slide, please. Before I get into this particular piece of it, I also want to speak to the park use bylaw. We will be doing some housekeeping to amend that particular bylaw, remove sections 3 and 7, and amend the language in section 4 to align with the camping bylaw that we're introducing. And the other piece that, before we get into the issue of the parks and so forth and the municipal campground, is that this, coupled with the district's affordable housing strategy and action plan, and working with other partners and other levels of government, to provide residential units across the housing continuum remains a priority of council as per the Affordable Housing Strategy and Action Plan. The camping bylaw also speaks to the municipal campground. It will be closed right at this point. And one, we're dealing with provincial health orders that we'll be waiting to see what the updates are on. But this year, the campground is proposed to offer usage for day use, recreational activities. We will look at some type of rentals for day use and programming outside, again, in conjunction with the public health orders. If and when it reopens, it will be open for group camping, and that will be done through proper documentation agreement of a license put in place. Next slide, please. The traffic bylaw change that we've mentioned is purely a seasonal adjustment to address primarily the hotspots where we see traffic congregating overnight. And we do get significant response from neighbors asking us to help them with this particular situation. The language there from the May 15th to September 30th window prohibits people from occupying their vehicles between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. on highways or district parking lots for more than 1 hour. Next slide, please. Others have also asked us, how do you plan on enforcing this, and what is the resources that you have available to you in the coverage? We will be looking at enhanced enforcement, which is included in the 2021 budget with our bylaw team. And we will be looking at evidence-based location. So what does that mean? Where we've had issues with parking, campfire, wildfire issues, we are tracking these and we're monitoring these, and that will be part of our enforcement strategy. The other thing that's important to mention is that we're not doing this alone. We recognize that there's other agencies and other levels of government that are also working towards the same outcome to protect our tourism assets and recreational opportunities from the potential impacts of poor user behavior. And this is a first time we put this group together, and there's going to be significant learnings throughout the season that we will track and manage and adapt accordingly with our messaging, our enforcement and education and so forth, including where we may have some of our temporary amenities located. This group will most likely meet bi-weekly, and we will continue to listen and work as a collective. Next slide, please. In closing, again, the goals of this particular our report to council and the bylaws that are in front of you are to help manage and mitigate visitor impacts during the summer season in all neighborhoods, to support tourism, but to do it in a way that, again, we move people to the places that are designed for them to camp. And we do know there are vacancy rates at times throughout the summer, less on the weekends, but there's still vacancy rates, and more so Monday to Friday. Again, take into the consideration the needs of the homeless, and continue to work with provincial partners to secure affordable housing for Squamish residents across the housing continuum that is defined by the provincial government. Next slide, please. As I spoke earlier, our budget does not need to be amended in regards to bylaw enforcement. That has already been injected into the 2021 budget. Next slide, please. Also, as I mentioned, we have a whole suite of bylaws that would inform and educate and enforce when needed. We will be bringing forward the municipal ticket information and notice of bylaw enforcements to May 11th, and hoping on May 18th the culmination of all that, along with the adoption of camping and traffic bylaw, we will be able to be ready for the May long weekend to be out and support the residents and the tourism that are joining us over the season. Therefore, staff are recommending that camping bylaw 2829 2021 be given 3 readings as amended. This amendment also is a result of the feedback that we received from the residents, and we've included this bylaw to the language to read. This bylaw only applies to any park located north of the Mamquam River and to the 2 geographic areas indicated blue and red in Schedule A of this bylaw. That the District of Squamish give first 3 readings to the traffic bylaw 2220-201, 2, amended bylaw number 2830-2021, and finally that the District of Squamish give first 3 readings to the park use bylaw number 1752-2003, amendment bylaw number 2828-2021. Next slide, please. Staff are not proposing an alternate recommendation due to the associated risk and possibility and ability to manage visitor impacts for the upcoming season at this point. Thank you very much, Council, for your time. Through the chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Pagely. So Council, at this time, I'll take questions on all 3 of these bylaws because they are related and are useful when read together. But maybe in asking your question, you can indicate which bylaw you're speaking to specifically. That will help members of the public that are tuning in tonight and our staff as well. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, staff, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the proposed amendment for the camping bylaw, extending its application to the blue areas as well as the parks north of the Mamquam. I guess I'm curious why we wouldn't just apply it across the entire district and restrict it just to the park areas and the areas in blue. Because then to me that means that somebody erecting a camping shelter on public property that's not a park north of the Mamquam, we wouldn't actually be able to enforce this bylaw.
Through the chair to Councillor Stoner, bylaw 3.2 A prohibits camping in any public spaces. Or sleeping overnight in any public spaces.
Right, so then what is the purpose of the blue area in Schedule A?
It's to, 1, identify, again, there's no camping in the blue area in Schedule A, and it's to clearly articulate where the homeless have the right to shelter, except as per 4.1A of those 10 points that are identified in that section, Part 4. It's where they're allowed to overnight shelter.
So just to clarify, with the proposed amendment, would that allow the homeless to shelter in basically all parks of the district, including the area north?
Through the chair to Councillor Stoner, the answer is no, it's just in the blue area.
Does that satisfy your questions for now, Councillor Stoner?
I'm going to have to think through that a little bit more. It's still not entirely clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hertford, then Councilor Pettingill.
Thank you. I'd just like to be pointed to the section that outlines the requirements of the blue area. I understand Mr. Pagely's definition. I'm just looking for it in the related bylaws.
Mr. Pagely, is that defined in the bylaws or defined in the schedule?
Sorry, through the chair, I could not hear that.
I think Councilor Hertford is looking for the definition of the blue zone in the bylaw, or is it on the schedule?
Okay, through the chair, Councilor Hertford, 3.1 is the only language that we have that identifies that. Staff have made a note that there is an opportunity to create a much more robust and clear definition in the legend of Schedule A that's attached to the bylaw, which would clearly identify the language that we were just talking about, where they can temporary shelter and where they cannot camp. So we will make that adjustment on Schedule A.
Any further follow-up, Councilor Hertford?
Just from a procedural standpoint, can that be done after 3 readings if hypothetically this was given 3 readings, or to me that seems fairly substantive?
We would do it at the time of 3 readings. So it would be the recommendation as amended to add the language about North Campground, and by amending the red zone on Schedule A to read X, whatever the language then says, and then the blue zone to be the area that the homeless can temporarily shelter.
Okay, so will that language be shared with us in writing?
If you give us, we can do it if we take breaks.
Councilor Hertford, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. While we're on the topic of the mapping, I'm just curious about the on the map on Schedule A. The blue area seems to miss a section I expected it to cover. Specifically, is that Centennial Way, sort of the east end of Centennial Way. And given it's a lower traffic, almost dead end street, I'm just curious if that was omitted on intentionally or otherwise, as we've been generally speaking about this as north and south of the Malcolm.
It was intentionally omitted, as this is leased Crown land, one of which is a campground, and we don't want the bylaw to apply to any of that leased Crown land. So we don't want to sterilize campground, it's already included there, so it doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Pettingill, and then I have Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. Do we have data about the number of tickets and enforcement interactions or conversations we had last year?
We do, but I don't have it in front of me. I may defer to Ms. Kidner, who I know did an analysis of our bylaw complaints. Ms. Kidner, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, I don't have that information right now, but I can say in general, the analysis showed that bylaw complaints appeared on a seasonal basis, so seasonal spikes, and tended to grow over time since 2014. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but if that's information that you like, perhaps staff can find a way to get that to you.
Yeah, I am sort of wanting to understand the magnitude of sort of interactions we had, especially last year. You know, because the bylaw we made it through the season last year with that, and so I just want to understand some scope of magnitude here. The other question I had, the in section 3.2, I think it says that the municipal campground, you can't enter the municipal campground between May 1st and October 15th. And I know we spoke to that a little bit. I'm just trying to understand those dates because my understanding is that we may use it for day use. We may eventually open it up to group booking and so on, and we don't have servicing in the winter. So those dates seemed reversed to me, that it would be from October 15th, through May 1st, where we wouldn't want people there, and then the rest were, we're not opening it for the season, but there may be other uses there. I'm just wondering if staff can explain that.
Through the chair, Councillor Penny, I'll start, and I would look to Ms. Arthur if she wants to add. The intent is to ensure that we focus on the season, and I just want to make sure, Councillor Penny, can you just again refer to the specific item that you're referencing?
Sorry, I believe it's in the camping bylaw, and section 3.2 I have in my notes. So we speak to the dates upon which no one can enter or remain in the municipal campground. And those dates seem reversed to me.
And that particular piece is in regards to overnight camping. So that's why we felt that was important. That's where we have the most seasonal activity and potential. So we wanted to ensure that that remains in the bylaw. There's no access for overnight camping between May 1st and October 15th for people in the campground.
Okay, I didn't see that was specific to overnight, but I'll double check that. I'll stand down for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I note that the blue zone in the camping bylaw encompasses a Smoke Bluffs Park parking lot, but not the park itself. The Smoke Bluffs Park, as we have it today, has experienced 4 major forest fires since 1951, 3 in my lifetime. And each one of those fires has been caused, is well known. The story behind them have been human caused, whether carelessness or handling of debris, that sort of thing. And I'm not aware of anywhere else in the district that has quite that fire history. And so my question is whether some consideration could be given, either, as you suggest, the language of the Schedule A of the camping bylaw, you do intend to address that language, and perhaps that may be an opportunity, or otherwise to expand the area of application or contemplate that in future. As you emphasized, Mr. Pagely, we are learning as we go, but I just wondered as to the mechanism as to how we might encompass the park or give that consideration.
Through the chair, I'll defer to Ms. Arthur as to the mechanism and how we would be able to address Councillor Anderson's question.
Specific to Smoke Bluff Park? So
yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the Smoke Bluff Park is included in the area where there is no camping.
And so it is in the blue zone.
It's partially in blue and partially in the red from the way I'm looking at that.
Thank you for the clarification. I was unclear with the map, and I do understand that we're, yeah, I'm not alone perhaps in having difficulty with the map, but thank you. I'm satisfied with that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Anderson, but were you also not asking why it wasn't listed along with Rose Park and some of the other parks versus just being in the blue zone?
My specific concern is with Smoke Bluffs Park. I think that we have other tools, and this, again, we'll learn as we go, but there are various ways we can apply tools and resources to addressing management issues, but my question was specific to Smoke Bluffs Park.
Okay. Ms. Arthur?
Can I go back to Councillor Penningale's question, because I can respond, I can clarify for So Council Pettingill, 3.2 E says enter or remain on the municipal campground between May 1st and October 15th. But if you read above it, it says except for as provided for under section 3.3, which says 3.2 of this bylaw, which is the campground, does not prohibit an activity expressly authorized under a written agreement with the district, which we will give out licenses and permits, camping permits, and that's what that agreement is. So if you're not there with a camping permit issued at Brennan Park, you can't be there. That's what that means. So you have to, book your spot and carry on.
Council Pena?
Yeah, thank you for that. Although if I read this, then as I read the text, it would say to me that outside of that, so from October through May, I could use that area, not overnight, but I could enter and remain from October to May, it would seem.
A seasonal campground, and it closes. It's closed for that period. It's not open to anybody.
Okay.
Because it's a seasonal campground, not a year-round campground.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to ask a question about the traffic bylaw and the addition there. So staff have presented that. I think one of the key pieces here is how we effectively manage areas that are hotspots for recreational visitors or tourism. But the traffic management bylaw doesn't necessarily help to differentiate those who are here on a tourist basis or those that are here and perhaps camping overnight and expressly exhibiting those behaviors that we don't want to see or that are driving complaints. And so where do we actually capture the enforcement direction and priorities that staff will be using to enforce this bylaw, as we've heard stated in this presentation?
Through the chair to Councillor Stoner, enforcement staff are instructed and consistently following a couple approaches. First, one would educate and create awareness of if there is any issue that's not compliant with the traffic bylaw to whether it's a visitor or a resident. And if they are noticing particular repeat offenders, or if there's traffic patterns that have folks congregating in neighborhoods with vehicles that is creating an issue for local residents or their quality of life, they will be instructed to particularly focus on those areas. As far as, well, let me stop there. Does that answer part of it?
Yeah, it does. And I guess I wonder, maybe a clearer question would be, is it possible for us to bring forward a policy direction on how we direct that enforcement to go hand in hand with this bylaw? I appreciate putting it in the bylaw is probably not the right place to do it, but I'm just trying to get a sense of where we can actually provide some transparency to our community as to how these bylaws get enforced, more so than just a presentation. So is the policy appropriate, I guess would be the question.
Through the chair to Councillor Stoner, I've made a note of that, and I will work with our staff to address that issue and bring forward such requests.
All right, are there any further questions on either or on these three bylaws? Ms. Linde?
Mayor Elliott, I would request that staff, if we could have a break, or at some point staff can draw up the language around the red area and the blue area to be attached to the map. I don't know if council would recess for that, or if you want to just.
I think council is looking for some additional clarity on defining the blue and red zones. So if that's something that we can, I mean, we heard it verbally, but I think for the benefit of the public and council to be able to see it in writing would be helpful, I think, council. Yes. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Once we've defined what the blue area is, and I'd love to see that in writing, I'd just like a little bit of rationale around how that area was selected. I think we've been quite clear about the red area, and I'm just curious about the rationale behind the blue. I don't have a strong opinion at this point either way, because I'm still seeking the clarity, but I will need that.
All right, thank you. So if we recess till 7:15 and give chance for that to be put on a slide, sounds like the language is there, but it's just helpful for people to see it visually, I think, about what would be added to Schedule A in terms of describing the red and blue zones. Is that sufficient, Mr. Tately?
Absolutely, through the chair, thank you.
Okay, so we'll recess until 7:15. Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. I want to just go back to council, see if there's any other general questions before we put up the slide on the Schedule A amendments around clarifying the blue zone. Are there any other questions? Councillor.
And this, I was looking for an appropriate time to ask about review. As we go through this, it seems to be a seasonal spike, and I'd like to avoid getting to a point where it's May, or I think last year we were in June or July, but when we were discussing this, where we can review what happened and potentially have some solutions earlier in the budget process. And I was wondering if staff had any thoughts on that as far as a review date for, I'd say, the visitor management portion of this that does sort of drive the changes that we have in these bylaws. Has any thought been given to that?
You're on mute, Mr. Pagey.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councilor Herford, thank you for asking that question. We have had some early discussions. We are looking at having a visitor coordinator to oversee and manage and track all the issues and activities regarding the visitor traffic or visitor camping management plan. And your idea is excellent. We will then look at how we can build a report and bring that forward to council in a timely fashion to support the budget process for 2022.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just a quick question on the Parks and Recreation Service Establishment Parks Regulation Bylaw. We're proposing to remove section 3, but section 4 of the bylaw refers to section 3. And I'm just wondering if staff can speak to why we haven't amended section 4.
Through the chair to Councillor Stoner, I believe there was a late revision sent out that does address your issue. Good catch, and we did have that adjusted in the new bylaw wording. So
we distributed a new bylaw, and there's a new 2C, and it says by deleting the words section 3 in section 4 and inserting the words this bylaw. So you've got the red line version there as well, so you can see how that changes the meaning of that and catches exactly what you're referring to.
Okay. So I'm just going to have staff put up a slide that includes the language that will be added to Schedule A to define blue and the red zone, and then council have an opportunity to ask questions if it's still not clear. So the amendment is in Schedule A by adding to the legend, the red area means no camping or temporary shelters. And this is consistent with how the bylaw has been for quite some time now. And then also in Schedule A by adding to the legend, blue area means no camping and includes the areas where the homeless have the right to shelter, with the exception of section 4.1. And 4.1 lists some exclusions, like Sand Park Park and Rose Park. So hopefully that brings a little bit more clarity to folks. Councillor Harford?
Thank you. That helps. Is there a seasonal aspect to the blue, or is this intended to be a 12-month a year? Just to be clear.
12 months of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you, through the chair. I guess I'm curious why we wouldn't apply, or maybe the question is, can staff clarify how we defined the blue area and why we wouldn't include it as across the entire district?
Ms. Arthur?
The blue area identifies where people can't camp, but also where the homeless can erect shelters. We've added the words that include any park north of the Mamquam River to this, because we actually have tools in place to regulate camping that are outside of the camping bylaw. For example, we've got the traffic bylaw, we've got the zoning bylaw. So if it's not zoned for camping, you can't camp there. We've got the noise bylaw, and other regulatory bylaw tools that are not coming to my mind right now. When we brought forward bylaws that had blanket prohibition previously, they were, council was more interested, I think, in focusing on where the hot areas were, and so that's what this schedule attempts to identify is the hotter areas, because we do know that, you know, we have tools to go into places to the north and take out campers who trespass on municipal property. This is also municipal camping. We don't want to have our bylaw inadvertently applied to ground land that's been supplied as a camper.
I guess just to follow up, it still seems fairly arbitrary to me because those same bylaws apply to the areas south of the Mamquam that are identified in blue in the Schedule A. So I'm just curious why we're establishing a different regulatory regime north and south of the Mamquam.
Through the chair to Councillor Stone, the blue zone clearly identifies where the homeless can temporarily erect shelters. That's the purpose of that particular blue zone in that area.
So is there a reason why staff feel like that blue area is more appropriate for accommodating the homeless's right to shelter than areas in the north?
This is the bylaw that, you know, after a lot of discussion, staff felt would meet the needs and the enforcement needs of staff. And it would be, we would like to give it a go the way that it's written right now, and if it needs an amendment, we can amend the bylaw. The way it's written right now with input from some groups around town, was mindful. It was the areas that are closest, identified as closest to services for people. And it included the areas that we are aware that the homeless are right now.
Any further follow-up, Councillor Stoner? Right, any further questions on any of these bylaws, the amendments that are right now? So council, we have asked questions about all three bylaws, but we do need to vote on them one at a time. So the staff recommendation is to give bylaw 2829, the camping bylaw 2829, 2021 be given first three readings. Someone that would like to move that? That's fine, I can see everybody on the screen. Okay, sorry, Councillor Race, you're moving that? I can't hear you. Can you unmute? Say, Councillor Race is having the same sound issue that earlier today, which means he's going to rebooting his computer. There was, I think, Councillor French seconded. Did we not? Yeah, Councillor French seconded. Okay, so the motion is on the floor while we wait for Councillor Race to log back in. Are there any comments?
I'll speak to it.
Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. We've spent the past year living in uncertainty on this issue, and it's time to bring certainty to the season ahead. And I think we still have work to do on this issue, and this isn't going to be the end-all be-all tonight, but I do look forward to seeing new information and new data coming together through this camping season so that we can evolve this into 2022 when we get to that camping season and hopefully have a more effective regime in place for the 2022 camping season. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner?
I will not be supporting the three readings of this bylaw at this time. I'd be willing to support one first reading perhaps, but I think it deserves further consideration and clarification, particularly of Schedule A. At this time, I appreciate staff taking the time to try and provide that clarity during this meeting in terms of referring to the blue area versus the red area. When we spoke about this last year, my concern with the blanket ban was that it actually removed the ability across the entire district for the homeless to seek shelter, which I felt was against some of the Supreme Court rulings for the against the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. And I think that the language that we've introduced in the camping bylaw addresses that concern. I'm just unclear as to why we've limited it to some areas and not others. And the rationale behind that still seems unclear to me. I appreciate that staff are looking at this as an opportunity to learn and apply it and learn from it, but I think it deserves a broader approach across our community and not singling out one half of the community versus the other.
Okay, I'm just gonna check in with Councilor Race. Councilor Race, I saw you raise your hand. I'm confirming that you put the motion forward for first three readings?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Actually, I thought Councillor Stoner had her hand up first and I was prepared to second, but either way.
Okay, so we actually have you as putting, I didn't see Councilor Stoner's hand, so
Oh, okay.
as putting the motion forward with Councilor French seconding three readings. And although unusual, when staff need to clarify a point of misinformation, I do enable them to speak once a resolution's on the floor, and Ms. Arthurs has a clarification she needs to put on the floor to ensure that we make the best decision possible this evening. Ms. Arthurs.
I realized when I was just rereading the section of the bylaw that deals that refers to temporary shelters. And Councillor Stoner, I apologize. Homeless would be permitted to erect temporary shelters in the park that are north of the mountain. So if bylaw would allow them to be north of the mountain in our parks. So I'm sorry about that.
I will just clarify my statement that I understand that with the amendment that's on the slide at the moment that the temporary shelters would be allowed in parks north of the Mamquam. I'm just unclear as to why we're applying that broadly to the blue area south of the Mamquam, but only to parks north of the Mamquam. And there seems to be a disconnect there for me that I'm unclear about. So that's why I'm unwilling to support the recommendation at this time.
Councilor Race, did you want to speak to the motion?
I'll get back in the list. I'll put my hand up and come in later.
Councilor Herford?
Thank you. Just a procedural point. I maybe Councillor Race we had marked as making this motion, but by his own account, Councillor Stoner had her hand up first. And given Councillor Stoner's comments, I don't think she intended to move this motion we're discussing now. So.
I had Councilor Race as moving the motion. I did not see Councilor Stoner and Councilor French seconding the motion. That is what is on the record.
Well, all right. Going from that point, I would like to see the enforcement policy and when we're to me that discretion of that enforcement, the direction of the enforcement, and the seasonal nature of the concerns are what would make me feel comfortable supporting this at this point. So I'm told we were told in the presentation that was coming, and I suppose I can support the readings now, but without that in place prior to adoption, then my support won't be available at adoption without that in place.
Thank you, Councilor Herford. Did I see your hand, Councilor Anderson? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I will be supporting the staff recommendations as we have them tonight. I'm satisfied staff listening to and working with advisors and stakeholders over many months now have worked hard to assess the risks and benefits of the different options and the use of the tools and resources we have. I agree with the focus on visitor management in this plan and the consideration given to affordable housing needs. We'll be learning as we go, as Mr. Pagely acknowledges. But Council sees and regularly hears about the environmental, social, and neighborhood impacts of visitors. And I think that this is the emphasis we can and should proceed with now. And I think we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Race, and then Councilor Paglia.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
We can't.
I don't think my computer likes me tonight. So I've moved this and I am supporting the staff recommendation. This is a pretty difficult topic and I think that's maybe an understatement. And I think this strikes a balance between what we need to do and what we're able to do given the present jurisprudence in Canada. To me, this does not ban anybody. This manages issues we've had in the community over the years, and we expect to be perhaps even more pressure coming in the future. And so I think it strikes a bit of a balance. I'm sure there will be learning coming out of this. I have no doubt. But I think it gives us the tools to deal with the seasonal pressure that we feel every year and have historically, as well as being able to deal with problems year round. And so I think we'll cover that. I'm satisfied that the enforcement will follow what we've done in many other situations in the district, and that is primarily when we're talking about enforcement, deal with education first, enforcement of difficult problems, and also mainly focus on complaint-based problems. We typically don't just go looking for problems. We react to public concerns and so forth. So I'm prepared to support this now.
Thank you, Councilor Pangale.
Yes, thanks. I can't support 3 readings at this point. I might see my way to first reading with some the policy piece, which I'll speak to. But I think we have stated that the intent of this is visitor management, and I understand there are the law puts restrictions on us how we can articulate ourselves, but that focus is not clear, and a policy, some policy directing enforcement and criteria may help with that. I think we have been doing some work on sort of differentiating between visitor management and vehicle residents and homelessness and so on. I think as a district, we've been putting a lot of effort into homelessness, even though it is largely a provincial issue caused by, I would say, federal economic decisions and so on. But that is not meant to be the focus here. And yet that sort of, these things are all very confused in this, and we haven't just gotten at the visitor management piece yet, I don't think. I think it's important to acknowledge we've had some staffing changes with COVID. There was some challenges at the municipal campground where resources and so on were redirected, and so that has all conspired to put, I think, from my perspective, some of where I'd hoped we would have been on vehicle residents and so on, or vehicle dwelling, I should say, not where I had hoped it to be. So I'm not looking for a perfect solution at this point. I don't know there is a perfect solution. So I can accept a compromise for this year, but I don't think this is that yet. So when we get to something further, that policy is going to be critical for whether or not I can support further. The other piece in this, looking at all the correspondence, this is an incredibly divisive issue, and I'm also seeing that people don't understand what we're proposing or even what the context is. And so I think for me, there needs to be a bit better understanding before we proceed to anything past first reading for sure. And I'm not expecting people to start agreeing after we get that understanding, but I think that opportunity to understand, at least the opportunity to do so, is important. And so I think that needs to be there, at least the opportunity for that needs to be there before we get to anything past first reading for sure. And so I'm not ready to support this right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pagel, there's a really, I think the sun is setting behind you, but very bright light behind you. Councilor Bettingill, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. I had one more thing that I had noted down. One other thing in terms of staying in a vehicle, some of the emails I think raised quite a good point. Even though our intent is visitor management, there are a lot of things, like if you've consumed too much alcohol or marijuana, or if I need to give my spouse a break, there's I think a lot of reasons why why you might be out in your car on the street for more than an hour. And I know it's not our intent at all to enforce that, but that isn't what the bylaw says. And so I think that's one of those pieces where maybe the policy can help deal with that, but there's some disconnect there for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank staff for the research they did on this, identifying where the complaints have been and where we can anticipate them this year. We know the community is struggling with the influx of visitors, so I think it's really important that we have something in place for this season to trial. I certainly think we did not communicate well enough coming out of committee of the whole what these three bylaws are and what they aren't. But I'm hoping tonight that we've added some clarity to that. So this is not about creating the opportunity for encampments. The focus of the district has been on housing people. Housing is a human right, and we worked very hard with Helping Hands to create under one roof. And we have the Buckley Avenue project going up, and we're already in discussions with BC Housing on the next project. So this is about making sure we're always focused on creating housing across the continuum, and I think that's been a bit lost in this discussion, is making sure that the people that want a roof over their head have that option. And then I think we do need to bring our bylaws in line with the BC Supreme Court ruling that requires us to provide opportunities for those who cannot find themselves room at a shelter or in a facility like under one roof, the opportunity to erect a temporary shelter so that they can shelter from the elements and sleep overnight on public lands. And so I think with the descriptions on Schedule A, we provide for that. And it feels, I can sense the apprehension in the community because they have seen so many stories in the news, but we are bringing our bylaws in line to cities like Victoria, who have amended their bylaws to manage this situation as well. So we are getting ahead of this, not falling behind. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And I think I've heard several of my colleagues talk to a policy piece around the enforcement side of this. And I think if they want to see that move forward, then they need to put forward a motion this evening to make sure that that comes forward at adoption. But our bylaw officers understand that their role is about education and about voluntary compliance. And it's not targeting people that live here year round and know how to live in harmony with our community. I don't get complaints about people who are living here year round in their vehicles. I get complaints about people who are visiting and disrespecting our community and our environment. And so we shouldn't conflate those two issues. They're very, very different. And so this is our effort focused on visitor management. Unfortunately, bylaws cannot be written with subtlety. They have to be quite focused and not create a lot of gray area. But certainly through our enforcement efforts, we know where the hotspots are. We've got data from 2014 that tell us exactly where we should be with our bylaw officers doing that education, moving people along and into campgrounds that are visiting. So I'm happy to support this at 3 readings. We'll look forward to hopefully publishing, I think at this point, a helpful frequently asked questions document to go along with these bylaws would be helpful in the coming days. But I think we found a good place to start on the bigger issue of visitor management. And And as my colleague said, and Mr. Pagey said, we'll be back to revisit this in the fall once we know what impact this has had. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Listening to my colleagues' comments, I think we're making comments on all three bylaws at this point, and I had kept my comments to the camping bylaw. So I just want to add a few thoughts. There's no doubt, in as per last week's committee of the whole, that I appreciate the direction of staff in terms of focusing on the areas that we know are impactful to our community, and the heightened seasonality that we have with the visitation rates is the thing that we're trying to focus on. As I mentioned last week, the challenge is always the devil's in the details with seeing the way that the bylaws are written. And that is just where my hesitation is coming from this evening. I've already spoken to the points of clarification that I would like to see in the camping bylaw and why I'm not supporting first three readings of that, because I think that it's inconsistent. And similarly, I wouldn't be willing to support all three readings of the traffic bylaw without greater clarity on that enforcement policy piece. So I hear Mayor Elliott and my colleagues in terms of that being a motion to bring forward, which I will do after the fact, after we vote on this one. But there's just some missing pieces to me that I think we just need to, I would like to see ironed out personally before giving all three readings to these bylaws. But I generally think that with further clarity and communication of where we're trying to get to, this is generally the right direction, but I am just uncomfortable with all three readings this evening.
Thank you. People can speak to the other bylaws as we raise them, but we are now going to vote on camping bylaw number 28, 29, 2021, beginning first three readings. Any opposed? Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettengill opposed. Motion carries. Next up is Squamish District of Squamish Traffic Bylaw Amendment Bylaw number 2830, 2021, be given first three readings. I'll move that if there is a seconder. Seconded by Councillor French. Any comments on the traffic bylaw? I'll call the question. Any opposed? With Pettengill and Stoner opposed, motion carries. Next up, District of Squamish Parks Use Bylaw Amendment Bylaw number 2828, be given first three readings. By Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments on this bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any Councillor Stoner and Councillor Pettengill opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, Mayor. If possible, I would like to test a motion with council, given that first three readings of those bylaws were just passed, and that is that staff bring back a policy that outlines the enforcement approach and priorities of the camping bylaw, traffic bylaw, and park use bylaw, along with at time of adoption.
It's seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments on this? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. And I'll just say that to me, I think that this is a really important piece. I do hear staff, we have generally an education and outreach enforcement first type of policy across the district, both with bylaw and with RCMP. But I do think that given the context with which we're trying to move these forward and really focusing on the areas that we know are hotspots, the problematic behaviors, that this will be a really important policy to go hand in hand so that our community is clear on what it is that we're trying to focus on with our enforcement efforts and what it is that we're not focused on. So without that, I would not be able to support adoption. So I hope that there is support across council to bring that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettengill, and then Councillor Herford.
Yes, thank you. I will be supporting this, and I just want to add, in some of the emails, I've taken to heart some of the concerns about stigmatizing those that are going to be engaging possibly with our bylaw, and concern about, how do we identify visitors versus non-visitors and all that sort of thing. And I think from my perspective, what's important here is, yes, it's about visitor management. That's why we're doing this. But it is problematic behaviors that I'm looking to see as the criteria for the trigger for enforcement. And so that's what I hope to see addressed in this policy. Thank you.
Councillor Herford?
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Stoner for the motion. I'll be supporting. I think that the clarity for the community with the enforcement is crucial to everyone involved, citizens to visitors and our vehicle dwellers, to understand exactly what to expect from the implementation of these bylaws that we're given readings tonight. So I hope to that the report will be robust and satisfy our my concerns. So I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Herford. I think this is a good companion piece to go with the bylaws, and so I'm happy to support this motion. So I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And procedurally, I just want to go back to the camping bylaw motion and make sure the person who put the motion forward, Councillor Race and Councillor French, you seconded, it was the amended motion that was on the screen. That was your intent? Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on to first three readings and adoption. This is for the District of Squamish Property Tax Rates Bylaw 2819-2021. This bylaw can be given first three readings tonight, and if it receives three readings, it can also be adopted this evening. So slowly, we are taking care of all things finance related in advance of all the deadlines coming up. Mr. Russell, were you going to speak to this?
Yes, I was. If you'll give me a moment, I will share my screen and we will be underway. Okay, I hope everyone can see the presentation that is in front of them.
Go ahead.
To Mayor, members of council, members of the public, administration, my name is Roland Russell, and I'll be giving you a short presentation on the 2021 tax bylaw. Earlier this spring, council met and deliberated over the financial plan. And as a result of that, we determined that the overall revenue requirement for 2021 was going to be $32 million. That is outlined on page 1 of your report, and also shown here on this slide. That was made up, that was an increase of 6.5% of tax revenue requirement year over year from 2020 to 2021. We would like to note that we had a very large increase in new properties coming onto the assessment roll, primarily strata and businesses, and they will contribute over 1.8 million of that 1.95 million requirement, so 6.1%, leaving approximately 0.4% for our existing property owners to pick up. As a result of that, we created 2021 tax rates and adjusted ratios and the port tax cap accordingly, and presented this to council a few short weeks ago. Council provided direction to administration to proceed with these rates and ratios for the 2021 tax rate bylaw, which we have done. Just want to make a few remarks with respect to the assessment base. Just some reminders that market change within a neighborhood impacts the assessment base. Market change can also occur within a range of housing, so within single residential or within strata housing. There's also significant changes in the assessment base related to non-market changes, and those relate to the additions of new development and also any changes or improvements made to existing developments. And lastly, just a reminder that the term average is a mathematical formula, and it is equal to the total of the value of the class divided by the number of properties folio. Lastly, we just want to remind council that the municipality collects taxes for the district of Squamish. We also collect taxes for a number of other agencies besides the district. So we collect taxes for other agencies such as the regional district, the hospital district, and BC assessment. Lastly, but not leastly, we collect school taxes, and the rate for school taxes is set by the province. I would like to make a quick comment that in 2020, the province reduced non-residential school tax to provide a break to businesses due to COVID. That was a one-year discount, and in 2021, the province has removed that COVID discount and reset the non-residential school rate to a value that is similar as to what it had been in previous years. I simply am noting that so that you are aware if you receive comments from businesses wondering why their taxes jumped significantly. That is the end of my presentation. There is a bylaw request resolution to give 3 readings to a bylaw in your package, and I would like to turn us back to that. So I will turn it back to Mayor and members of council. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Council, any questions on tax rate bylaw? So, Mr. Russell, you've summed it up.
You're too kind.
Councilor Stoner?
I was just going to move first reading.
First readings moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Race. Any comments? All right, seeing none, call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now that 3 readings are given, council, we can also adopt the tax rate bylaw. So I'd like to move that. Councilor Race moved that, seconded by Councilor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. So before we go into development permit 539, I think we should take another 10-minute break, just give everyone a chance to stretch their legs and refresh their cup. And we'll see you at 10 past the hour. Okay, thanks everyone for allowing us to have a little break there. We're on to item 10, staff reports. First up from community planning and infrastructure is development permit number 539. This is in Brackendale. Turn it over to Mr. Daly.
I'm just going to pass it over to my director, Mr. Veleniskas, to quickly give a brief overview on development permit area guideline legislation.
Thank you, Brian. Mayor, I'm hoping to just steal a few minutes of council's time because this development permit is coming back after being referred back to staff. And it's been a while since we've had a refresher, so I just have a few minutes of a presentation on DP area guidelines and their applicability.
Okay.
So essentially, guidelines are a set of policies that guide very specific development applications. Implementation can seem to be complex, especially with detailed guidelines, because there is a sense of subjectivity in interpreting the guidelines and development features. So staff work with the applicants extensively on reviewing the application using some judgment, but also heavily relying on the applicant's professionals, as well as our advisory bodies, such as the advisory design panel, for certain aspects such as code and architectural articulation, and working with the applicants to understand what the economic limitations of the project are. Sometimes not applying a guideline is as simple as the project is too small for practical application. There is no formula that can be simply applied, as is the case with zoning bylaw, where it's very black and white. There are areas of contradiction between guidelines, zoning requirements, flood-proofing requirements, building code, and now we also have step code. And it's something that's worth noting is that, for instance, when our development permit area guidelines were drafted back in 2017, we weren't implementing the step code at that point. So, that is not something that we considered. So an effective way of navigating the development permit review process and guideline applicability requires reflecting on the overall objective of the development permit area, flexibility, so that's using common sense in what guidelines may not be applicable in certain cases, and adaptability, which involves juggling these other competing factors such as zoning regulations, step code, flood-proofing requirements. So I guess all I'm trying to say is that in DP applications, especially where there are no variances, objectivity, flexibility, and adaptability is key in reviewing the application. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary, Mr. Veleniskas. Okay, now I guess turn over to you, Mr. Daly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning, and I'm here tonight to present a revised submission of development permit number 539. Excuse me. The subject property is located at 41665 to 41707 Government Road in Brackendale and is currently developed with the Brackendale General Store building, which houses the post office, the Crabapple Cafe, the general store, and 3 apartment units. The lands are zoned local commercial C1. Property to the south is also zoned C1, while other neighboring properties are zoned RS1 and RS2. The property has been zoned various versions of local commercial since the first zoning bylaw was adopted in the 1970s. The property is identified as a neighborhood node in the official community plan. At the November 3rd, 2020 special council meeting, council referred DP 539 back to staff for further review. Council and members of the public raised concerns regarding the proposed parking and height variances, as well as the form and character of the buildings. The original application sought 3 variances to the zoning bylaw that included an increase in allowable height, allowance for sharing of required visitor parking and commercial parking stalls, and to eliminate a required landscape strip along the parking stalls on the northern property line. Given concerns raised by council and members of the public regarding these variance requests, The proponent has revised the application so that it meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw and is no longer seeking variances. Revisions to the project include the number of units has been reduced from 28 residential units and 2 commercial units to 25 residential units and 1 commercial unit. The existing general store building will be maintained. The proponent has volunteered to enter into a housing agreement to secure the 25 units as market rental in perpetuity. The 6 moderate income rental units offered in the previous iteration are no longer viable for the developer due to the reduction of units. The project density has been reduced from 0.7 FSR to 0.62 FSR, including the existing general store building. The revised development proposal requires 35 residential parking spaces, 10 commercial parking spaces, and 7 visitor parking spaces. The development is providing the 52 required parking spaces on site. No parking variance is sought. This slide shows the site plan and the west elevation of Building B. The previous proposal included a commercial unit in Building B. This unit has been removed and replaced with parking. Both buildings have been reduced in height from 14.5 meters to 12.18 meters to meet the requirements of the C1 zone. The project is utilizing the recently adopted low carbon incentive program, which allows for a 1.5 meter height bonus for apartment buildings which are constructed to the low carbon building standards. Building A now presents a 3-story facade to the street. The east elevation of Building B has been further articulated with a contrasting color to break up the length of the wall. This slide is showing renderings of the previous submission on the top and the revised renderings below. The red line indicates the line of the previous building compared with the current submission. Building B, located behind the existing general store, has been moved further to the south to increase the setback from the north property line and provide the required 2-meter landscape buffer adjacent to the parking stalls. The shared outdoor space is now fully accessible. None of the revisions to the project impact the conformance with Development Permit Area 1, Protection of the Environment, or Development Permit Area 2, Protection from Flood Hazard Guidelines, as there are no changes to the footprint of the buildings. The proposed buildings and site design meet the objectives and guidelines of Development Permit Area 3. Staff reviewed the project with an approach to balance the competing objectives of maintaining the existing building on site, preserving the environmentally sensitive areas, providing rental housing, and enhancing an existing neighborhood node. The proposed development meets a number of OCP policies, including the ones listed here, associated with neighborhood nodes. A question was received regarding the proposed whether the proposed roof material conforms with guideline 36.18D, which is cool roofs and pavements made of highly reflective and emissive materials are encouraged to mitigate urban heat, lower energy use, and greenhouse gas emissions, and improve human health and comfort. The proposed roof material is galvanized corrugated metal, a highly durable, low maintenance, and effective material in combating urban heat island effects, as well as reducing the energy load requirements of the subject building. Many factors impact performance, including orientation, time of year, and daily weather. The 2 significant factors are emissivity and reflectance. Galvanized materials have a low emissivity, which means a low amount of energy is re-radiated or emitted from the roof surface after exposure to the sun. At the same time, it has a reasonably high solar reflective index, which means that a high amount of solar radiation is reflected from the surface. Using this material will reduce the overall building energy demand and lessen any urban heat island effect. So given that this project meets the objectives and guidelines of Development Permit Area 3 and a number of policies in the official community plan, staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize Development Permit number 539, subject to a housing agreement on title to secure the 25 residential units as market rental in perpetuity, registration of a flood covenant, registration of an environmental protection covenant, and the registration of a statutory right-of-way for public access across the Cottonwood Park Trail. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Daly. Council, any questions? Go ahead, Councilor Anderson.
Yes, I wonder if I could ask a clarifying question to staff regarding engagement. In the staff report under engagement, and I'll quote here, to inform the community per policy, the project was posted on the online development showcase. And I did explore that showcase. I just wanted to confirm that, or whether the revised version of the project was that information posted there? It wasn't clear to me. Or is the information that's on the showcase presently the information we had from last November?
Through the mayor, I believe the information on the development showcase was the previous proposal, and it has now been released publicly on this agenda.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Just a few questions of clarification. The 52 required parking stalls, are those all being provided off-street parking, or are we including counting some of the stalls that are on street?
They are all off-street parking stalls, so they're all provided on-site.
Great, thank you. And then in the staff report, it says that they are taking advantage of the 1.5 meter height bonus from the low carbon building standard, which is great. But the maximum GHGI for the building will be 1 kilogram CO2 equivalent. In the low carbon bylaw, we provided some flexibility for apartment buildings because we were told that being able to achieve that level of 1 kilogram was not possible. And so we set it at a level of 6 kilograms of CO2 emissions. So I'm just wondering if staff know if it will actually be achieving that level of 1 or if it's just meeting our bylaw, which is 6.
Through the chair, I have spoken with the applicant and they have engaged their energy consultants, and they believe they should be able to achieve the 1. My understanding is that if the building is heated with a low carbon heating source, such as electricity, that it should be able to obtain that.
Just want to add to what Brian said, through you, Chair. I believe the bylaw requirement is 1 for this extra height. So there's 2 density bonus systems. The density bonus system for 6 in apartments is related to the overall density. And the density bonus system for height requires that additional green energy requirement. So it goes from 6 to 1 as a requirement.
It's great. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Pettengill and then Councillor Hertford.
Yeah, too, and I thank staff for the refresher on the DPA guidelines, and the chair may want to direct me that this is a parking lot issue. I did ask about the cool roofs, and I guess in my own just quick research, galvanized metal by itself wouldn't be a cool roof, and so I understand that things like orientation, all that play into effect. I guess at the end of the day, I'm wondering if this was a matter of we decided this wasn't a significant guideline in this case, and I understand even if it was, that's not sufficient to deny the DP. I'm just trying to, do we have an objective measure, like a certain amount of reflectivity, objective amount that we expect, or do we just sort of use some general understanding of what people generally say about galvanized roofs and so on?
Mr. Villeneuve, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. So we do use our general understanding about cool roofs. Certain roof materials, like asphalt shingles, they actually come, some of them are actually certified as meeting the cool roof industry standards. I don't believe it's the same case for galvanized materials, but it is our general understanding that a light-colored material is essentially one of the primary indicators of that cool roof effect.
Okay, thank you. My other question, and this is more based on questions I tend to see in the public, and just confirming that because there are no variances requested here, there is no obligation and no leverage for us to compel affordable units or anything like that. This is compliant with our zoning and so on, and so as such, we would essentially we would approve the DP because it is compliant with our zoning.
Through you, Mayor, that is correct. It's meeting all the zoning requirements and DP area guidelines. So there is no leverage to require affordable housing. The rental housing that is being provided is part of our priority development application policy.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Daly, did I see your hand?
Yes, but Jonas just covered that. I was just going to note that that housing agreement is being volunteered. It is not a requirement.
Great, thank you. Councilor Herford.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for starting off with the presentation with the quick refresher on on the guidelines. I'm curious where this falls in the delegated authority, and seeing as it isn't it's a DP without variance, and someone could speak to that.
If there were 5 fewer units, it would fall into the delegated authority. So 20 residential units or less, but it has 25. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Stone.
Thank you. Just one further question that I'm hoping staff can clarify, because I find the renderings and the drawings a little bit confusing, is just pedestrian circulation through the site. So confirmation that sidewalks will be provided on government, and then how are pedestrians expected to get from government to the pathway behind that goes in behind the 2 buildings to the park?
If I may share my screen again, I will pull up the landscape plan. So I'm not sure if my cursor is visible to everyone here, but as you can see, there is a portion of the sort of the eastern portion in front of building A. There is a delineated asphalt path through the driveway. The site is constrained by the SPIA, the environmental setback. So no new development can take place in there. So this portion of the parkade has to remain, it's going to be geogrid and crushed gravel. They're proposing an aggregate binder to continue this path through the parking area and access the trail to Cottonwood Park. So that will be how pedestrians are meant to travel through the site. They did look at trying other options, but pretty much this was the only one that was viable given the constraints of the SPIA on the site. No new path could go anywhere else other than kind of where there's an existing disturbance or parking occurring.
Any further questions? Councilor Peniel?
Yes, thanks. One just clarification. We used the word accessible several times in this, and I just wanted to clarify, do we always mean in terms of for people, accessible for people with mobility challenges, or does it sometimes, could it just mean simply that there's not a locked gate or a fence?
So through the mayor, in specifically relating to the landscaped area beside building B, previously it was not accessible for people with mobility issues because there was a set of stairs. There was a commercial unit in that building before, and that needed to be built up because of the debris flow hazard. So it had to be elevated, which required the need for stairs to go down into that area and up to the commercial unit. Since that unit is no longer there, it is now just flat and level with the existing ground. So it should be accessible to people with mobility issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. This is to approve the DP with a few subject twos. Councilor Peniel, you're moving that? Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Stoner. Any comments? Councilor Anderson, French, Stoner. Grace.
Thank you. While I appreciate the hard work done between staff and the project team, I will not be supporting the staff recommendations regarding Development Permit 539 for 3 main reasons. Firstly, I'm not satisfied, or I'm at least skeptical that there is adequate parking provided. As one of our neighborhood correspondents has reminded us again, the proposed parking encompasses out on the street the property to the north, or at least it inevitably will practically. Secondly, and related to the general parking supply issue, I'm not satisfied that the safety for pedestrians, for visitors to the store and post office, and for school pupils traveling through here is assured. Thirdly, we are lacking an adequate assessment of the Brackendale store building. In the currently proposed design, and as was previously before us, everything is designed, arranged, and to be built around preserving the existing store and post office building. We've heard from owner Talib Jawani last November about his plan to retain this heritage building, and this is a sympathetic, voluntary gesture. However, as I pointed out last November, we do not have an adequate statement of significance for this building. And we don't have at least one that meets provincial guidelines, and they are well known and well rehearsed. A statement of significance for this instance of a very old building on wet ground should include a building inspection available to council and staff because of its importance with the proposal here. This is an old building with pumps working in the basement. The Heritage Building report we received last November also did not refer to two detailed histories of the Brackendale store. These are available through the library and on the internet. Since 1905, as these histories detail, there have been 4 buildings called the Brackendale store. The adjacency of the current store building to the street with no setback or adequate setback and no ability to reconfigure visitor parking and pedestrian and cycling use and safety is a central problem. And the constraints with this in this regard are referred to in the DPGA guidelines staff comments for section 36.6, parking and transportation, and for 36.9, the relationship of buildings to the street. Without an adequate building assessment and statement of significance, we cannot assess whether other options for the overall design and layout of a new complex could be pursued. This issue has been pointed out by several longtime area residents referring to safety for the pedestrians, in particular, these issues, which will continue to be inherent in the currently proposed design, I fear. So for the circumstances of the Brackendale store, an adequate statement of significance, including building assessment, would be necessary before I could agree that DPA guideline 36.4A, context and character, is satisfied. It seems to me we have skilled architects here, and I don't understand why we can't be more confident that we cannot come up with a plan for a Brackendale store version 5.0. one that realizes optimally a neighborhood hub for Brackendale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. This version of this project is much improved over the previous submission, in my opinion. The concerns I had about parking are absolutely addressed. The additional rental housing units in this development will bring much needed space for those looking for rental accommodation in our community. And this particular area hasn't had any new commercial space created in many years. So I think this area is very much ready for additional commercial space as well. I support this DPA.
Thank you, Councillor French, Councillor Stoner, and then Councillor Race.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will be supporting the motion on the floor and the staff recommendation. I don't see a reason to withhold the development permit application, given that there are no variances. I am dismayed that between the last time that we saw this, we've lost 1,000 square feet of commercial space and 6 below market rental units, which were previously offered by the developer and are no longer on the table as a result of some of the reductions that have been required to be made. I'm not sure that that is an enviable trade-off that our community actually needs at this point, but it is the position that we're currently in. And so, alas, I am excited that there is at least market rental and that they're offering that up. So thank the proponent for that, and excited to see if they can really do a apartment building at the level of low carbon intensity that they're describing. I'll also be interested to see that evolve in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. I will be supporting this as well. And I thank staff and the proponent for working to address the concerns that I and others had the last time this came before us. I take Councillor Stoner's point. I mean, in this process, we've lost a couple of things that might have been good, but you just sometimes can't get everything out of every site. And I think this is one of those circumstances. I was more concerned about the mass of the development last time. It is now shrunk down to what is more reasonable in my view, and so yes, we've lost a couple of things, but I think it still does accomplish a lot of social purpose, being rental housing in that area, and I'm not sure that there is any other rental housing even anywhere close to it apart from in suites. So I think it will accomplish some real benefits for the neighborhood. I think Councillor Anderson's point about the store, it is one of the older buildings in town. Hopefully it can be saved. And I think it also, for me, provides kind of a lower density transition between the street, the sidewalk, and the bigger massings in behind it. So I think that's an advantage of trying to save it and keep it. And with that,
work to make this fit within our zoning bylaw and not require any any exceptions to, and any I felt the previous design was just maybe, as Councillor Race summed up, sort of too much in one spot. I don't think it could do it all. I still feel it is large, but it does fit within our within the regulations. So I see no reason to not approve the DP. So I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pantgill.
Yes, thank you. I will be supporting the DP. It is consistent with our zoning requirements. I would have been happier, I think, to trade some of the parking for some more commercial or affordable housing. I think looking where we need to be in the very near future, we need to figure out how Squamish works without cars, without so many cars and without so much parking. And so I'm really eager to see that in all of our developments. I don't think the solution for parking and challenges around cars and traffic and so on is adding more cars and more incentives for cars. It just mathematically doesn't seem to work for me. It's probably a bigger discussion to have maybe during our next OCP review. But that being said, I think this does meet the requirements for parking, and so I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I will call the question. Any opposed? Anderson opposes, motion carries. So related to this, next up, item 11 is the District of Squamish Housing Agreement bylaw for this DP at 41665 to 41707 Government Road. That the District of Squamish Housing Agreement bylaw be given first in readings. Is there any questions about that document first of all? Seeing none, is there someone that wants to move that? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, we're on to item 12. This is the consent agenda. So if there's any items here that represent a conflict of interest for any council members, or any items that you wish to be debated or voted upon, we need to pull them now. Mr. Stoner.
Yeah, I'd like to pull letter 3 and staff update item D2.
Mr. Pantgill?
Councillor Stoner got the item that I would like to pull, so that's taken care of. Thank you.
Any others? Okay. So with those items pulled, can someone move the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll deal with the letter after item 14, Councillor Stoner. And then the staff update, we put in, where did we put it last time? Ms. Arthurs, under business arising? Under item 16. Okay, so under item 14, action requested, correspondence from C. Merrill regarding dog off-leash areas be referred to the GM of Community Services for response. Moved by Councillor Stoner, I'll second that. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. That A. Aurora from Statistics Canada, census support needed, that that email be referred to the Director of Communications. We certainly want that data. David census. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Herford. Thank you. Any opposed? Carries. From D and L Furbank, traffic in the Highlands, correspondence regarding their letter, traffic in the Highlands be referred to staff. By Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Reyes. Want to speak to this, Councillor Reyes?
I do. Actually, I had my hand up to change the motion, and maybe council will go along with me on this. We have had numerous items of correspondence with respect to this particular area at the end of Perth. And the situation doesn't seem to be changing at all, except that it seems to be getting worse and not better. And so I think what we're doing now, if anything, just isn't working. And so I think we need to have some solutions, and maybe some of them are drastic solutions. And I'm not going to propose one. What I would suggest we do is refer it to staff, as the recommendation states, and that staff be directed to bring back options for solving this for this summer. In time for this summer, or words to that effect. In other words, I don't want to wait until next fall and try and deal with this again. And things that come to my mind, for example, are resident-only parking, which I know is we've sort of thought about and said, no, that just moves the problem. But I think we have to do something a little bit more dramatic than whatever it is we're doing now.
Okay.
So I guess just as a matter, I wasn't sure, did you get a motion on the floor? Moved.
Anderson put the original motion on the floor. Councillor Anderson.
Chair, I'm happy to withdraw my motion, and if Councillor Reyes will put forward a motion as he has spelled out.
So the motion is on.
Thank you. So it would be the motion as written there be referred to staff, and that staff be directed to bring back to council in a timely manner options for this cycling season. If that's clear enough.
Okay. Any further comment? Call the question. Opposed? That correspondence received regarding the Brennan Park playgrounds be referred to the 2022 budget discussions. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Councillor Stoner, you had a letter from our MP about the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program launch.
Thank you. I suspect that staff have seen this, but I just wanted to refer this to staff because I think it could be a potentially great funding opportunity for some of our forthcoming real estate and facilities that we need to invest in. So I was just going to refer to staff for consideration.
I'll second that. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have approval of minutes, recommendations from committee of the whole. Approve the filming policy amendments as presented on April 27th by Council French, second by Councilor Anderson. Comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. The District of Squamish received the April 27th report from Economic Development and endorsed the next implementation steps as described in the report. This is on employment, space, and land research. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Stoner. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Carries. We addressed this earlier this evening, but the staff bring forward amendments to the camping bylaw 2769, traffic bylaw 2220, and parks bylaw 1752 for 3 readings at the May 4th special meeting. The council approves the strategies that are outlined in table 2 of the April 27th report to council, and that the municipal campground remain closed except for event bookings, of which eligibility will be determined by evolving public health guidelines. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor French. Call the question. Any opposed? Carries. That staff investigate solutions to offer additional trips on the same route as Transit Route 5 during the afternoon service gap from 2:45 to 6:20 p.m. between mid-June and September. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor French. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Is this arising from the minutes? This is where you pulled up a staff report about the Help Cities Leads, Councilor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for the work on revising the requests under the Help Cities Lead campaign with our Community Climate Action Plan. I think it is very much aligned with a lot of the work that we have outlined in our action plan, and so I was going to suggest a motion that the mayor write a letter of support for the Helping Cities Lead campaign, and I will help you write it if we get council support, so it doesn't fall on your plate.
Councilor Anderson, are you seconding, or is that a question?
Second, but I do have a comment to make as well.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to note that it's a very good staff report, good summary for us, but there's an element that might have been added on the part of our staff, and it is in the area of relevant community climate action plan actions, and there's one that's missing. And in our under big move number 5 for build better new buildings, and this relates directly to in the Victoria letter, policy tool number 1, regulating climate pollution for new buildings, we have encouraged building materials that store carbon or have less embodied emissions. So this might have been highlighted, and we can think about that going forward, because we actually have already included this as an item in our Loggers Lane East sub-area plan, where this comes under energy and climate change policies. So that is in fact an action item that we have actioned, and it's something that we can refer to. It is a growing field of interest over the lifetime of a building or a new building. The embodied carbon is at least as important as the operational energy issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Any other comments? Councilor Pettengill?
Yeah, just want to clarify that it's implicit in this that we support the campaign. And also, I think the ask is for letters to specific ministers, and I just want to make sure that the direction we're giving is able to support that.
That was my intention. I can clarify my motion if need be.
I'm not going to send it to random ministers. Councilor Pettengill.
Okay.
All
It
right.
might not be a bad idea.
I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have advisory design panel minutes to approve from April 15th by Councilor French, seconded by Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. council staff in-camera item announcements. Councilor Anderson?
Yes, it is with regret that I pass on the news of the passing on May 1st of a former Squamish council member, Norm Werner. Mr. Werner served 3 terms as a council member, being first elected in 1984 and again serving during the first half of the 1990s under both Mayor Egan Tobis and later Corinne Lonsdale. During recent years, Norm Werner also served on the SLRD board as alternate for Electoral Area A. He was a very active member of the community for a very long time, including service with local organizations such as the Kinsmen, tourism committees, and among downtown storefront business owners. For example, Mr. Werner played a key role in the establishment of the municipal campground on Loggers Lane, which was originally a Kinsman Service Club project. Many provincial and federal election day volunteers, myself included, will remember Norm Werner as a great captain running a tight ship for those election day operations. Norm Werner will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Got ahead of me on the agenda there a little bit. We don't have any unscheduled public attendance this evening. Open question period of clarification related to any agenda items. There's no one online to ask any clarifying questions, so we will move on to councilor staff announcements. Thank you, Councilor Anderson, for sharing that sad news with us. He will be missed. I appreciate you providing that history and context. Other councilor staff announcements. I'll go to Councilor Race and then Councilor French.
Thank you. This is just an update on the April Library Board meeting. We welcomed a new board trustee, Christine Baker, also presentation, and we approved the 2020 audited financial statements. The board is presently working through Self-Paced Introduction to Inclusivity and Diversity, which is an online course discussing sections over the next several months. And the launch of the visiting library service has been very successful, and we've been overwhelmed with community members who are keen to volunteer, and we're now looking to identify and connect with more homebound patrons. So if anybody knows of any, refer them to the library staff for deliveries. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor French.
Thank you. I don't want to pass on that I attended my first Food Policy Council meeting on April the 21st. Planner Sarah McJanet was also in attendance. And one highlight from that meeting that I'll share was a presentation from Samantha Gambling of the Coalition for Healthy School Food. And I anticipate we'll likely be hearing more from that organization in the future as the coalition is looking for support, statements of support from various government bodies. And there was an expression of interest in potentially presenting to council at some point in the nearish future. So we might anticipate seeing an application to appear by Samantha Gambling in the coming weeks or months. And as noted in the letter from Anil Arora, the 2021 census is underway as of today. For me anyway, the package for my household was dropped off at my door, and we might actually be finished early enough tonight that I can do it tonight. And I know I'm not alone in being excited about the census, because I posted this on Facebook today, and more than a few people wrote back indicating they too got their packages. Some had even completed it today. So I encourage everybody to watch out for your census package if it hasn't arrived already, and get those filed so that we get our appropriate funding allocations for the various money issues that come out of the census. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council staff announcements? Nightingale?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to quickly say I've been really pleased and somewhat inspired by the eagerness of everyone to get vaccinated. I know just around my own office, the excitement that I hear from people when they find out, oh, they can get on a list or they can go and get a vaccine. And so, you know, as someone that's in a higher risk category, it's something I really appreciate. and also appreciate the efforts of our staff and Vancouver Coastal Health to provide vaccinations to our community in an effective way. And so just a quick thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Pagnell. And yes, please do encourage everyone you know that if they haven't registered, to please register, because we're about to get a lot more vaccine in this province. So the faster it rolls out, the better. Councillor Stoner and I agreed that we would take turns updating on the events of our Squamish Lillooet Regional District meetings. So I am doing the first one from our April meeting. We had both the board meeting, a committee of the whole, as well as a regional hospital district meeting. So at the board we had, and now you can actually go and watch these because they're now recorded, which was not the case in the past. So if anything piques your interest, it's there for your viewing pleasure. We had a delegation from BC Hydro, one of their regular updates on their Bridge River Valley projects. The regional district's been cleaning up some of their zoning bylaw. So some housekeeping issues in areas A, B, and D around retaining walls was adopted. Changed the definition of agriculture to come in line with provincial definitions, and TUPs were added in areas A and B. There was a TUP application for a temporary concrete plant in area C that passed. Regional districts received more restart grant funding, so they received another allocation. So the SLRD received $125,000 in additional funding through that stream. So staff are just putting together some ideas on how best to apply that at the regional level. Our financial statements are approved. Squamish Trail Society received some money. They're helping to fix a portion of the Sea to Sky Trail in the Checkins Canyon that was damaged. At Committee of the Whole, we had a presentation from the Fraser Basin Council about their programs on electrifying cars and fleets, and also their salmon safe certification for infrastructure, urban development, farms, etc. It was an interesting presentation, and their slides are available if you'd like to view them. And then at the Regional Hospital District Board, we had a delegation from Dr. James Cranston from here in Squamish, advocating for a CT scanner for Squamish General Hospital. That was well received by the board. We'll be looking at ways to fund that in the 2022 budget. That's my summary. Councillor Stoner will do the next one after the May meeting. That's all I have. We finished all of our closed items, so motion to turn. Oh, Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I got there a bit late, but there was an excellent childcare roundtable discussion last night. I was wondering if someone might just summarize that for us briefly, or if someone's prepared to.
Sure. As people know, childcare is a big issue in our community, and I've been meeting weekly with our MLA, MP, and the mayors in the corridor. We asked if our MP would host a community roundtable on the topic of childcare coming out of the budget announcement from the federal government to invest $30 billion in the next 5 years in a universal childcare program. And so MP Weiler hosted the meeting, Emily Sturdy was there, myself, a number of councillors, and great group of people from our community table here in Squamish. But attendees from Mayor Crompton was there, Chair of the SLRD, Jen Ford was in attendance. And it was really great just to hear questions from the community about their ideas on how the universal program can roll out. There was a great question from a woman who's an entrepreneur that called out the fact that childcare is not an eligible business deduction if you're a sole proprietor or a woman starting up a business. So that was something that Patrick was taking away to look at. People had a chance to hear about ways in which we're trying to increase spaces, but also education opportunities for ECEs. We also talked about retention of ECEs and how these things are related to affordable housing, and touched briefly on the transition of childcare into the Ministry of Education over the next 2 years. But I expect we'll cover that a little bit more thoroughly at the mayor's drop-in on May 13th. But you can feel the anxiety still in our community that we just simply aren't meeting the need that's there today and the stress that that's causing families. And so it was great to have the governments that are now responsible for inking a deal. I did remind people that the best thing they can do is write to the relevant ministers at provincial and federal level and really promote the idea that BC should be the first province in Canada to strike an agreement with the federal government, make sure that money flows to our province sooner rather than later so that we can start implementing universal childcare. But there is a commitment to drop childcare fees by half before the end of next year, 2022, and then bring it down to the $10 a day target within 5 years. So that is some great news, and also recognizing that that's not going to help some of the families that are struggling right now. So it was a good conversation, but there's certainly not a lot of easy answers to solving this problem. Well, we're on it. We have a great team, and we're going to revisit the conversation from the Squamish perspective on the 13th. Councillor French will be attending, as well as our planner, Sarah. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just to add that the roundtable discussion was recorded and will be made available through MP Weiler's Facebook page, I believe. So if you didn't catch it and you'd like to, it was recorded.
The new dawn of all these electronic meetings. They are in perpetuity for everyone to watch. Yeah, so anything else? Seeing nothing further, motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Hereford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Thank you to the staff who supported us this evening and to the public who tuned in. Appreciate all your work very much.